All right, and welcome to the first ever Prometheus Edgic podcast. This is the podcast where we are going to be breaking down season 2, Prometheus, Season of the Elders. And today, my co-host is Tiki. Tiki, how are you today?
I've been working in the sun for 8 hours. What is with this heat? I am exhausted, but I'm stoked. I'm stoked to be here.
Yes, I love that we're
I'm
doing.
trying to make a two triple shots joke, essentially. Like, I actually need the two triple shots this time.
Well, hopefully, if we need to take a break and you need anything, we
No,
can.
I'm good. I'm good, man. Let's do it.
Yeah. So before we officially get started, Tiki, this was your idea. All credit goes to you, man. This is absolutely fantastic. And this is, one of the great things about, having something like Prometheus is that, we're building this family, this community of people. And like this is now the third podcast for the season you've come on, and I absolutely love it.
Oh, yeah. No problem.
So yeah, thank you for everything. But let's jump right into it. For those who don't know about Edgic, Edgic is essentially a combination of editing and the word logic. It's all about reading the edit, reading the narrative that's being constructed. The Edgic was created for Survivor. Essentially, a bunch of people sort of reverse engineered the typical edit for a Survivor season to figure out who was going to be potentially the winner. And it was broken up into 3 parts. An individual Edgic is broken up into rating, tone, and visibility. Those 3 parts. So your rating is essentially your editing personality. You could be given an INV, which stands for invisible. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. You could be given a UTR, which means under the radar. You're not quite invisible, but you're not very prominent. You have middle of the road.
You might have like a throwaway confessional or like one throwaway tribal council question, stuff like that.
Yes. Then you have middle of the road, which is abbreviated by MOR, and it's typically somebody who is featured, is usually secondary to one of the bigger personalities or the bigger things at play, but you're not exactly a minor character. Then we have CP.
MOR, really quick, is it's very much defined as like being the narrator role.
Okay, even that I didn't know. If I'm being completely honest, while I do pay attention to the edit, I don't exactly pay attention when I'm watching a typical Survivor season to the official Edgic. But I've been right about
there's not really like people doing like the ratings and the charts anymore. It's more so people just kind of like freeform discussing the edit.
Yeah.
So honestly, these ratings were kind of like going a little bit old school with them.
But, yeah, I think some of them, especially when we get to tone, is a little. But anyway, yeah, some people still do them actually on YouTube. There's a bunch of channels. But anyway, yes. So then we have CP, which CP stands for complex personality. It's kind of getting the inner workings of these players. You're really learning the ins and outs, their motivations, their hows, their whys, their whatever. Typically, you find that a lot of winners in Survivor have a mix of CP and UTR. UTR, the under the radar part. So it's like they have a bunch of episodes that is, they're rated complex personalities, and then they usually have like a cool down period. I guess it's essentially to throw you off, also to give focus to other players, but usually at that point, those 2 combinations are a pretty good idea that someone's probably going to win a season. But in my mind, yes, that details a good winner because you're getting a lot of their backstory, but it doesn't necessarily make for the best storytelling, in my opinion. Anyway, so our last rating that we have is OTT, which OTT is over the top. Really, at the end of the day, they're your characters. They are your big personalities, larger than life. So that is everything for rating. For tone's a little bit easier. You either have nothing, which is no tone. You have positive, which is abbreviated by a P. You have negative, which is abbreviated by an N. Positive and negative is very self-explanatory to say what those 2 are. You have M, which stands for mixed. Yep. And then you have rare, but still
Okay, I
sometimes.
can tell you there's not going to be any PPs or NNs.
Yes, there will. Yeah, PP
Yeah,
is
those
like
are rare. Those are
your
rare.
super positive, NN is your super negative. It's like very
My
rare that those
go-tos for
exist.
PP and NN are actually both in Nicaragua. Actually, both of them in the in one episode. Actually, I would say the NN is like the Nyanka in the Nyanka Quit episode.
Oh yes, yes,
And then
yes.
I would say PP is Holly in that same episode where she's like, like giving away her reward and everything. And then, that's very much like a contrast.
Yeah. Sometimes you also with the PP you get
I'm sorry, the 5-year-old in me is.
You're fine. Sometimes with the PP edits you get like the people that are a medevac, especially if they've made it a decent amount of the way.
Micronesia.
Yeah. So you get that overly positive. They want you to really feel, bad for them, very sympathetic.
But then I would also say something like, I don't know, let's say like Russell throughout most of Heroes versus Villains was in N.
Yes. Yeah, pretty much. You might get, even in his first season, you might get like a mix, but usually it's very negative or
I would honestly say Samoa is more mixed. It was usually very negative, but there were certainly mixed episodes for sure.
Yes, yeah. And then
this first successful idol play would be a good example of a mixed episode from him.
To be honest, I've only ever seen that season once, so I couldn't even tell you the tone for the original season. But all good points. So the last part of this little formula that gives
I've not really calculated, honestly, just because we're going over multiple episodes.
Oh, that's fair enough. I will just detail it just a little bit real quick because it's quick anyway. But there's the last part of that little formula is visibility. It's on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being you are invisible, 5 being you have a constant screen presence. But that's pretty much it. So
but that's more so like episode by episode ratings and less so the individual ratings.
Yeah, we're essentially, or more so, Tiki will be taking the lead on this. I'll comment on the current boots that we've had, but I won't really be commenting on the future stuff.
Fair.
But yeah, so we'll be going over essentially the first 5 episodes. I will also say this as I guess essentially a disclaimer. I'm not CBS. I'm not the entity that is Survivor in the way that I edit. I'd like to say that I edit a little bit differently because obviously when you're editing, each character needs to get their screen time for their individual arc. They need to get the season arc. They need to get the episode arc. So the Edgic sort of, going over the Edgics is absolutely for fun, but it's not really going to potentially be able to accurately predict the winner. So with that being said, let's just take it up to the first boot, which is Ariana.
All right, Ariana is actually pretty simple. I gave her a UTR.
Just that, UTR.
Yeah, just flat UTR.
Cool.
Just, she had like 1 or 2 confessionals, but very minimal presence. And honestly, having a minimal presence was what kind of got her booted to begin with. So I don't really have a ton to say about her. She seemed like a really nice person. And the way that she kind of reacted to her boot, I felt kind of bad for. It was kind of like, not even in the same league as my reaction, but the whole like, oh, I'm sorry, I was annoying or whatever she said. Like, I felt that stung a little, man. It's like,
yeah, she said that she was painfully awkward.
That's it. And that stings even more. I'm like, no, you're not. You're totally fine.
Yeah,
it's Ariana is listening. Like you seem very, very cool, but
yeah,
but I will say, just as far as the edit goes, I'm guessing it was just a situation where she obviously wasn't in the game for a long amount of time. I'm sure you probably just didn't get a lot of content from her to begin with. I know what that's like as far as like being booted from the game right away, and I'm sure you guys would have loved to throw content from me, but you just didn't have a lot to work with.
Hey, but what you delivered was fantastic.
I have 2 triple shots. That's it.
All right. So I agree with the Ariana thing. That's pretty much what I had given her as well. I'm also going to be writing these down. So if anyone sees me going like that, I'm just writing it down. So we both agree. Ariana for the UTR, under the radar. So moving on, we have our second boot, which is Mark. What did you think about Mark?
Mark was honestly one of the most tricky ones to rate out of the whole cast, either eliminated people or people in the merge. Ultimately, I landed on MORM, middle of the road mixed. I was kind of tempted to give him a complex personality mixed. At one point, I was tempted to give him a complex personality positive. I'm giving him mixed because he is very much a player where it's like he landed in a bad position right away through really not a ton of fault of his own. As we saw, it was literally just the way the break rooms broke down.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a bit of scrambling by him in the last episode he was in. But I do think you were supposed to be sympathetic to him, but also kind of like see why they kept Jeffrey over him. So yeah, pretty straightforward. But I don't know. What do you think of MORM? Do you? Because it's way less straightforward than Ariana, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Mark is a little bit more of a the situation in rating him is a little bit more complex, and I don't say complex to UCP, but just because it's a little bit harder to do. I think MORM is a pretty good rating, definitely middle of the road. He's not, I wouldn't say if he would have stayed longer, he might have been a complex personality, especially given what I know about him as a player, having played with him twice and seen him play 2 games now. So total of 4 games in total. But yeah, and then mixed, I think the only reason mixed would be because of some of the final scrambling at the end of episode 2.
Yeah,
it gives a little bit of a more negative, which actually I should have said this when I was officially going over the ratings. So negative doesn't necessarily mean you're like a villain. Negative means, you might have had something that made you look bad, like you failed something, you're aloof, I hate to even use the word, but like stupid. So it could be a multitude of things. And I think
Tasha in the last episode was a really good example of a negative edit, but not necessarily like in a bad way.
Yes. Yeah. So, the negative doesn't necessarily have to mean villain. So I think giving Mark the mix, a middle of the road M is actually something that I would completely agree with as well.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we have Jeffrey. This should be interesting.
All right. Jeffrey was actually pretty straightforward. I gave him OTT toneless.
I think I agree with that as well.
Yeah.
Like
he's the character. He's not necessarily a bad guy. He's not a bad guy, but he's also, but there are also a few moments with him where he kind of put his foot in his mouth. But honestly, there wasn't enough tone one way or another to make him mix. So I just went with, he's just a big OTT character.
Yeah, I think for Jeffrey, I definitely would say he's OTT. And the funny thing is when I was initially thinking about all the Edgic ratings for all the cast, especially when you compare it to something like Big Brother, Survivor, any sort of large reality show, I feel like Prometheus doesn't quite have those OTT characters, but if we were to readjust the scale for the level that we're working with, I think there might be a couple OTTs, and I think Jeffrey could be an OTT. I think also if you're going to change anything within that rating, I would potentially change the tone of Jeffrey's to either mixed or negative. And I would potentially argue, actually, I would say mixed. And the reason why is because people definitely were gravitated towards Jeffrey's like cheerleader antics, his positivity. But then there was the negative side where he clearly had no clue what was going on, very naive to the game, to the meta of it all. And it resulted in things like Jeffrey, complimenting Bloody, but in a sense painting a target on her, as well as just like saying things he shouldn't. So I would say Jeffrey, for me, upon kind of reevaluating it in my mind, he's OTTM.
Okay,
that would
that's
be
fair.
thing.
And honestly, the next one is going to be M as well. So I just maybe in my mind just didn't want to have like 3 M's in a row.
It's fair. So next up, we do have Maddie.
Also, just really quick, I didn't really get a chance to talk about him in the recap I was on. I just want to give you credit. Jeffrey was just another absolute grand slam of casting choice. I like, honestly, Casey, after episode 1, I was really hoping that he bounced back because I really loved his energy. And after episode 1, I was like, you know what? I'm going to have a gut shot. I could see Jeffrey with his cheerleader stuff. I could see him making a run for this, even if he is in a bad position right now. But yeah, obviously after episode 2, I kind of knew he was done for. But I would say Jeffrey is my second favorite character of the pre-merge outside of Tasha.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Outside of the merge, yeah. So the pre-merge, Jeffrey's number 2 for you. Yeah, I actually had a lot of people in those first 3 episodes message me just saying they love Jeffrey. Like,
he's got a magnetic screen presence, man.
Absolutely. It's interesting. Had Jeffrey lasted longer, I think Jeffrey could have taken the money for that fan favorite role. But he definitely was of those first 3 episodes. But obviously,
and
other
also,
people are going to take over.
You know this. I was geeking out about it as soon as I saw him in the cast. But I love the tie to last season with CJ, like that whole redemption thing. I was eating that up, man. Like I was like putty in your hands with that crap.
Yeah, it's interesting though. I mean, we have a couple connections, from season 1 to season 2. Jocelyn is Mara's cousin, so we have that connection as well. But anyway, I guess we're getting off topic here. But that was Jeffrey. So we had OTT was your official rating, correct?
Yes.
All right, cool. So moving on to Maddie. So our episode 4 boot.
All right, Maddie, I gave a CPM.
CPM, okay.
And honestly, the only reason I gave him an M and not an N is because of the actual way he exited, which was like very memorable, very positive. Probably one of the most memorable things about his arc as a whole, I think. And he was like, I would say a lot of his stuff was negative toned as far as like just being kind of like a wily guy that people really couldn't trust and was in everyone's ear and they kind of knew it. But at the same time, I do think there is some positive tone to him just as far as like the actual person that he is. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think also real quick so I can write it down. What was your rating again?
CPM.
Okay. I think for Maddie had Maddie's team, so Guyan, had they had gone to the temple in episode or 2 before they actually had, I actually think Maddie's very early aggressive plays
I could see that
would have actually saved him, and we would have potentially been looking at an Aaron bloody boot.
Because once they lost 3 in a row, they literally just had time to kill on their hands at that point.
Yeah, a lot of strategizing, a lot of time to kill. But with Maddie, I want to give Maddie a CP rating. I think mixed is fair. Mixed is fair for a multitude of reasons. I want to give Maddie that CP rating.
Would you say maybe MORM?
Maybe. It's like, I almost feel like it's somehow in between the two, but I think I'm going to just lower it down and just say MORM for mine.
That's fair.
All right. So next up, the first boot of episode 5 is your favorite, Tasha.
All right, Tasha, I mean this with like all the respect in the world. You are OTT and girl, you're over the top negative. I mean, are you surprised? Come on. I think that might be the most obvious one of the bunch.
I would agree. I think Tasha
in the most entertaining way possible.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I would say if you were to do like a rating of individual episodes, she was definitely not that in the first episode. I could actually very much argue there is a side of her that would be looked at as sympathetic, that, these circumstances of just having bad Wi-Fi literally fucked her whole game. But then we see in episode 2 during the challenge, she's like, fuck you, Jeffrey, you're my next boot, to getting fucking hammered and just all over the place.
Please.
It's still like one of my favorite quotes, and I don't care what anyone says. I'm happy that I named the episode that. No, yeah, I think I would 100% agree. OTTN. I think, there is it really just the end comes down to some character comments as well as the getting drunk pretty much. But yeah, I would agree with that. Tasha has definitely been one of the standout characters of the first five.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. And then we have the final boot of episode 5, which is Josh.
Yeah, this one is pretty straightforward as well. I think I just went with an MOR toneless.
I think that's fair. It's kind of a shame. I think Josh is a good player. I feel like generally speaking, in his other games, he's looked at as a villain, and we never really got that. He's got a very specific way that he carries himself.
And Brady, kind of like, again, with my yin yang thing that I brought up last episode, I feel like Brady almost kind of like overshadowed him in the villain department.
Yeah, but the funny thing is like, especially I think back to something like Rupert and how he got super mad at the betrayal by Fair Play. Yeah. And it's almost like it not exactly the same situation.
That fucker would be kicked out.
Oh, yeah. Like
that shoulder grab, dude.
Yeah, that it was definitely, intimidation tactics. Grab. And so I think that's like, granted, now Michael didn't do that to anyone. They're separated, they're separated. But yeah, I think it's that. It's like, all right, dude, you betrayed me. So like you look at it negatively, but it's not exactly villainous. But with Josh, I think, your rating, I completely agree with. It's just very middle of the road. It's very neutral. I would have been very curious to see what kind of damage he could have done coming into the merge. But I guess we'll never know. But yeah, that's Josh.
All right.
So you're going to kind of take more of a lead on this one. If you want to explain how this next portion of the podcast is going to go.
Okay, yeah, sure. So basically what I have is essentially my Edgic predictions. And this is not even necessarily the boot order that I am predicting. Instead, it is the people, like basically number 10 is the person that I think is least likely to win based on the Edgic, all the way up to the person that I think is most likely to win based on the edit. I think it's pretty straightforward. And I can tell you're beaming, man. I think you're stoked for this because you know exactly what's going to happen.
I'm very excited. Yeah, I'm just very excited about the whole thing.
All right.
Let's see how this goes.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, so in 10th place, I decided to go with CJ for a number of reasons. Now, CJ, actually in the edit, I have him as UTRP, and he's the only one from the merge. I actually think out of all the people in the merge, he probably made the least impression on me, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But he is obviously not in a great position within his own tribe because he is still in that voting minority. And I don't know. I just don't really have a lot of info on his game. I don't necessarily have a good grasp on like who exactly trusts him because, like I said, a lot of people, most of the people left on his tribe were not on his side of the vote the last round, not last round, but the round before that. So I don't know. He is just very and he's very inconspicuous as far as his actual presence goes. So yeah, he's going to be at the bottom.
And you said UTRP?
UTRP, yes. And the reason I said UTRP is just I do feel like he has gotten a few moments of positivity, a few moments of chill. I do think he is a lot more chill than Josh was. Like, I feel like him basically kind of like laying low last episode, whereas Josh was trying to scramble. That sort of saved his ass to a certain extent, I think. So, yeah, I'm going to have him at that position. All right. Next up is Jocelyn, who I went with a toneless MOR. And Jocelyn, honestly, the next two of them could be just a byproduct of how I am reading their edit based on the twist that they have been involved in. So obviously with Jocelyn, you have the handicap on her edit of, like she didn't have a vote the first 3 times. And she was very much just kind of like, her whole role was like, oh, I'm going to leave this, I'm going to leave this break room. So I can be the person to leave the break room. So the break room isn't full, that kind of thing. And we haven't really seen her do a ton within the game itself. I definitely do think it's possible for her to turn her game on now that the merge is here. I do think it's possible. But I don't know. I haven't really gotten a great sense of how exactly she wants to play. I don't necessarily think she's gotten anywhere close to a complex personality episode in the time she's been on screen. I think it's very much just every episode she kind of just has like a couple of narration confessionals. That's usually about it. So yeah, just a very MOR toneless presence. She seems very nice, and she's actually like one of my biggest fans from the comments, so I appreciate that. But just as far as the actual episodes go, I know it could just be because she might be one of the most quote unquote normal people left in the cast. Like that might be why she's not exactly like jumping off the screen in some regards. But I really do think it has mostly to do with the fact that, the whole elder thing and the fact that she was kind of like out of the loop on some of the strategy. So yeah, that's where I'm going to go there. Okay, the next one might surprise you. And the reason why he's as low as he is, don't get me wrong, he's obviously like one of the big characters of the season for sure. And as far as a rating goes, I think he's an easy OTTP.
I know.
Ben in the 8th position. And the reason is simply because I think he is very out in the open. He already pulled that move to overthrow Jocelyn. I really think that if the other tribe is going to stick together at the merge, I think Ben is an easy target. And I am worried about him come the merge. I do think he's made a couple decent allies. I'm kind of hoping that Jenny, who's done a lot of legwork with, I think Jenny out of all of them on that tribe, on the tribe who has the minority of the people. Casey, I'm not even going to try to remember the tribe names this time.
It's fine. Aaron is the smaller. Think of it, smaller group, smaller name.
Right. I think Jenny is definitely the person that's positioned the best out of all of them. But I think Ben has easily the biggest target on his back. I think he's just like, he's a very over the top, outgoing person. I don't know. I can't. He almost kind of reminds me of like the Colin of this season, if that makes sense. Except he's even more over the top than Colin was, if that's possible.
Wow, so, very interesting comparison.
Well, I'm just saying because how people were kind of like, towards the merge, people were kind of seeing Colin as like the lifeblood of his tribe. And I very much see Ben in the same light.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah. I think Colin is a little bit more strategic. I don't know. It's like Ben. Here's the thing with the over the top rating. I do think he's got a very good mind for the game, to be sure. I don't necessarily think we have seen him. I think his mind for the game has been more as far as like preserving the group dynamics. And basically his whole game has kind of like been reliant on essentially like creating the most chill group he can to go into the merge with. And we don't necessarily know a ton about his individual game yet. And granted, by the end of the season, I could totally see, like, if my prediction's wrong, if he, if he makes a deep run at this thing, I could absolutely see him morphing into CPP. But for now, I'm going to go with over the top positive, just because, like I said, he's such a big, like, I'm sure you're super stoked with his, with his casting and super stoked that he's made it to the merge. I mean, he's just a larger than life personality. I made this comparison last time, but he's almost kind of like the Rupert of the season.
I think you also at one point compared Bloody to Rupert as well.
No, you're right. It was okay. You know what? I think Ben is the better comparison, though, because Bloody is very much a memorable character, but I think she's not as loud of a character.
If I were to compare Bloody to anyone, because clearly Bloody is the super fan, the
By the way, to
almost
transition, Bloody. Oh wait, no, never mind, never mind. Bloody is next alphabetically, not next on my rankings. I'm sorry.
okay. No, it's okay. But yeah, like for me, like if I were to compare anyone, like Bloody definitely not Rupert, but I could see the larger than life thing. Bloody definitely fits the super fan archetype almost, and then the super fan gets associated with the nerd, and you have like two big nerds. You
Don't
have
say it.
annoying ass Cochran, who
say
I
it.
don't like, but then you have Christian
That's what I
Hubicki.
was- yeah.
You have Christian Hubicki, who I love, and I love Bloody. So I'll make that comparison.
You know what? It's going to be really interesting to talk with Andrew about South Pacific, because I will agree with you that I hate Cochran on Karamoan. I cannot stand Cochran on Karamoan. He's an arrogant little shit on Karamoan. That game was basically handed to him on a silver platter. I actually find his character in South Pacific pretty entertaining. So that'll be a good listen if you're going to be listening to me and Andrew's podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyways.
All right. So who is after Ben?
After Ben, we have the guy that I thought was 10th place initially. We have Antonio.
Okay, Antonio.
And Antonio is going to be MORP. And, much of the same reasons. I feel like he's insulated within his tribe quite well, but I don't necessarily know a ton about his strategy, a ton about him on a personal level. So because of that, I'm kind of ranking him like right towards the middle, both as far as the ratings go and as far as the rankings go. Okay. All right. Next up, we got Brady. And Brady, I am going to be giving a CPN, which I think is pretty fair. And honestly, Brady, I really do think that he could very much make a deep run at this. I just wonder if people are going to catch on, because I think out of everyone in the cast, he's the one that's tried to take advantage of, that little I'm sorry, I forget exactly what you called it, but the fake merge scenario where both teams could communicate with each other.
The delegation round.
Yes. Thank you. I think Brady really took advantage of that. I think he plucked himself up a nice couple allies there. And I think his trick is going to be just like if he can get away with it or not. But as it stands now, Casey, assuming the finale is 5 people, I don't know if you want to confirm or deny if it's 5 people.
No, this season, I believe it's 4.
It's 4 in the finale? Okay.
Yeah, I'll have to double check my chart, but I'm fairly certain it's 4.
No problem. All right, so next up is Tracy. And ironically enough, Casey, Tracy, the oldest person in the cast, and Ben, the youngest person in the cast, are the two over-the-top positive characters I have.
Okay.
And I really like that symmetry.
Also, real quick, not to backtrack, but you did give Michael or Brady an M, right?
N.
Oh, negative.
Negative, yes.
Okay. Based on our earlier conversations, I should have realized you meant N.
Right.
So Tracy is over the top positive.
Yeah. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. She's just a big personality. She's not necessarily the deepest thinker when it comes to the game, but she's super duper likable. Everyone in her tribe loves her. I haven't heard a single bad word about her the whole time. So yeah, I could absolutely see her making a deep run. And I've already kind of said this, but I think I don't necessarily see her winning, just as far as like I could see her, maybe pulling some sort of social faux pas or not understanding the deeper ORG etiquette. That's the word I was looking for last time when I got all stumbled on my words. But yeah, I also think that I think people are very much going to view her as a threat for the jury votes once it gets time for the end game, just because she's so likable. So I think she's got a lot to overcome as far as actually getting to the end goes. That being said, I do think she's in a really good position on her tribe, and I think she could make a deep run at it. right now, as far as the placements go, I basically have her at 5th place, which would essentially make her kind of the fallen angel. Which, if that plays out, I think that'd be very appropriate for her as far as the character archetype goes. So,
Really quick, for those who don't watch Survivor, what is the fallen angel?
oh God, the fallen angel is the person who gets voted out right before the end game. Let's see, some good examples of that would be Wentworth and Second Chance. Who else would be a good one? What are some of your favorite fallen angels?
My favorite, one of my favorites, would be someone like Devon's. He was the most, I think, in my eyes, one of the most obvious fallen angels in recent Survivor
and Devon.
Oh God, I don't really care for that season, but yes, he's also a good one.
The only reason Devon sticks out in my mind is because he went to my local college.
Yeah, I think a lot of that cast for me is very forgettable, but
Dr. Mike, how can you forget about Dr. Honestly, the only one in that cast I really want to see back is Lauren Rimmer.
Yeah, see, forgettable cast for me. I've only ever seen it season 1.
Have Lauren Rimmer back. She's the only one. She's the only one that sticks out. Anyways.
But anyway, back to Tracy. So Tracy, you think, is OTTP, fallen angel of the season.
Yep.
Anything else? All right, moving on.
From Tracy. Okay, let's see. Then we get to the final 4 in my mind. 4th place, and I can honestly totally see this happening. I have Bloody, who I have as a toneless CP. And that was a hard one to call because Bloody certainly does have a lot of personality. But that being said, I do think her edit has been very game-centered. And I do think out of all the cast, she is probably the biggest game bot. And because of that, I feel like game bots are usually reserved for a toneless CP edit. And yeah, I don't know. It is interesting because, like you said, Bloody is a super fan. And by all accounts, she should have an over-the-top personality. And she does to a certain extent. But I think she explains her thought process so well and so thoroughly and with such clarity that there's really nothing over the top about it. Does that make sense?
I think that is 100% fair. Which, Bloody, if you're listening, Bloody does not really watch Survivor. I think she's seen like a couple seasons.
Really?
I know, right? Surprise.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Last I heard, she was hoping to start watching some seasons, but she didn't know where to start. That's last I heard. But anyway,
I should totally find that even more flattering that she's just such a big fan of this show. Then.
Yes. So, Bloody, if you need recommendations, I'm sure if you reach out to Tiki, he would have a million. But yes, my
go-to is South Pacific, but that's not a newbie season for sure.
No.
You have to watch Coach's other 2 seasons first, and then to watch Heroes versus Villains, you have to watch all that. Yeah, that's a whole right.
Yeah, it's a long journey, but he's actually my all-time favorite.
To get that Coach storyline properly. So
yeah. So I will say, I think that's totally fair. And honestly, I think that's a good compliment towards Bloody. So Bloody, and that's a good thing, but also being over the top's not a bad thing either. But I just always think of Bloody as this over the top sort of character.
Are always my favorite characters. Always.
Yeah.
I don't care if they're overexposed. Those are exactly the kind of characters I watch Survivor for. Are the ones I think that are larger than life, the ones that pop out of your TV screen.
Yeah, I think most people do for that exact reason, and that's why a lot of these people end up returning for future seasons. But
I mean, that's not to say that that I don't like the complex personalities or even some solid narrators. Like Sophie, one of my all-time favorite winners, is infamously her Edgic chart was just straight MOR3, 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 MOR3.
But yeah, so Bloody is very interesting in that regard. So giving her a CP toneless rating is very interesting.
Okay. All right. And then we get to my predicted final 3. The person that I say is the 3rd place is going to be Louise. And Louise actually this might be I do really love over-the-top characters, but this might be my personal favorite rating as far as characters go, which is CPM.
Okay.
And the reason that's my favorite rating is because you get, I feel like it's the best of both worlds, right? Because you get their deep inner thoughts, but you also get a complex portrait of both the good and the bad qualities of this person. And honestly, I think with Louise, it should be pretty obvious why I went that way, because her whole thing is the whole kind of like, oh, I'm gonna play like you could recite it better than me.
Yeah, it's all the rat talk. I'm gonna ratatouille my way to the end.
Exactly.
I think at one point there's a line of I'm gonna pull a knife out of my big bushy tail. Like, fantastic.
Do have bushy tails.
Yep. All right, so Louise gets a CPM. All right.
Then, honestly, between these two, I really do think, and you shouldn't be surprised that this is how the ratings ended up, because I literally told you that
in the last podcast. Yeah.
But
I'm just curious to hear the insight.
Ginny is number 2, and Ginny is going to get another toneless CP, actually. And honestly, I was tempted to give Ginny a CPP, but I decided that Ben has so much positivity in his edit, and she is so tied to Ben, that I feel like her being a toneless CP is a good kind of like contrast to him being the over-the-top positive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
All right, just toneless CP.
Yeah, I very much think that Ginny, like I said, I think out of her tribe, I think she's by far the one who set up the best. I would honestly be kind of surprised if she wasn't the last person standing from that tribe. I think she's got a really killer instinct. I think even so far, like this early into the season, she's already killed the Asian females named Jenny who have been screwed by Survivor Twist's curse. Thank you. That's actually probably, thank you, Casey, for not having BS twists too. Please never have BS twists in Prometheus.
I never intend on it.
But anyways, and that leaves my winner pick is Erin, who I have as another MORP. And Erin is another one where it's like, she's honestly MORP. No, you know what? Do I have a CPP?
No.
Screw it. I think I'm going to make Erin the CPP, because just to have one for every person. And Erin, I feel like she has been quiet. Like, honestly, the first couple episodes, I probably couldn't have even picked her out of the cast as far as like, in the big wide shots of everyone. She was pretty quiet, but I think last episode, the one before this current one, she really emerged as a character. And then this current one, I was really feeling her. Like as you kind of saw, like even as I was watching the episode, I was like, oh, I am looking at Erin. Like Erin seems very, very solid. And like I already kind of explained, I absolutely can see the dynamics of her tribe breaking down is I absolutely see the guys turning on each other. Like the guys are just a total shit show on that tribe as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they all seem like good people. I'm not trying to,
as players.
But I think it's ultimately going to be her, Bloody, Tracy at the end. I think Bloody would probably cut Tracy and take her because she knows how big of a threat Tracy would be. I could see that being like the big moment of Bloody's arc. I can already see it. Like Tracy, we played this whole game together, but I gotta cut you, girl. You're the one thing standing in my way. I could already like visualize that going down. And then
that's it.
So
that's
just
the Edgic.
Absolutely completely wrong.
Maybe we will see.
I am very excited, Casey.
Yeah.
And, honestly, I absolutely want to make this like a tradition. And when we check in with Prometheus 3, I want to go down the list. I want you to keep these ratings and keep these rankings. And I want to go down the list and see just how bad or good I did. I am very curious to keep that up, make it a running thing.
Oh, I'm perfectly fine with that. Hell, maybe we could even go back at someday and do season 1, just an overview.
We could. It would be a little bit different than this episode.
Of course, but hell, one day in the future, years from now, we could say that we ran through every season's Edgic together.
Sure.
So I love it. So do you have any final thoughts with this Edgic podcast?
No, I don't. I think this season has just been absolutely fantastic. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love my cast. I love my season, but I think this season is just like, it's the sequel season that we all absolutely wanted it to be. I think you've stepped up your game in the production department. I think you've stepped up your game in the casting department. I think everything is just so spot on. Like I already told you last time, don't worry about the rush to get the episodes out. We're all patiently waiting each time. They are always worth the wait, no questions asked. Every time I see a new upload, I'm always like, oh, yes, thank God, finally. And that kind of anticipation is priceless, So like, don't, I just want to make sure that you're having a good time and you're not like pulling your hair out trying to edit it. So
I'm always pulling my hair out, but it's always fun. And I love hearing stuff like that. So thank you for that. But I guess on that note, that is the Edgic podcast with Tiki. And thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Tiki, for even coming up with this and coming together to make this happen. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And this is a podcast you should definitely share, because I think maybe your friends and family be very interested in to hear the overview for the season. But on that note, we're going to end it and have a good night.
See you later, folks.